Hi there, welcome to today's program, and we have a friend from down under, Australia, although he's got a nice speaking voice. Some Australians speak a little bit like that, you know, but Mark Tronson is a sports chaplain, and Mark, I must tell you, first time I went to Australia, I noticed that Aussies call British people pums. I'm not quite sure what it means, but it's supposed to be very insulting. And I remember this Aussie saying to me, Mark, he said, do you know how to save a drowning pom? So I said, no. He said, good. That's outrageous. I like it. You like it, yeah. Typical Australian. But Mark, you're a very unusual person because you're involved with sports, but you're also involved in railways, or in America we call them railroads. And tell us a little bit of your life story.
Well, I have a speech impediment. And my wife can't hear very well.
Okay.
And our family joke, because today, the 12th, we're celebrating 32 years just of marriage.
Wow.
And the secret is that Delma can't hear and I can't talk.
So we're going to do it in sign language, are we, today?
Well, I was a train driver just for 10 years.
And where about in Australia?
That was just in New South Wales.
Okay.
A place called Port Kembla. And that I had a passion just for railways.
Yeah.
But I also had a passion for sports.
Yeah.
And I would often think to myself, why don't we have in our professional sports chaplains or pastors who can share the love of Jesus as they do in the States and in England.
Yeah.
And so that was always there. And I went to theological college in 1977.
Yeah.
And the very first chapel service on a Tuesday morning on my very first week, we had the Reverend Albert Dubé from Northside Baptist Church come and speak to the chapel service. And I said to myself, I'm going to get some real theological stuff here. This will, this is going to set me off just for the next 4 years. And he came and he just spoke about Jesus. He didn't speak about anything else but the love and passion of Jesus. And I said, that's what I needed to hear to get me back to what I should be doing in these 4 years, to be concentrating on Jesus and not to fill my head with all sorts of rubbish. And so at the end of my 4 years, I finished with first class honours and 2 theological prizes, and then I went on just to do some PhDs. But the point is that it was just the central focus was on Jesus.
That's great. Now, Aussies are probably per capita the biggest sporting participants. I mean, I know they love watching, but, you know, Australia is a very competitive society, isn't it?
Well, we are. And that here in the States, you have 280 millions.
Yeah.
We have 20 millions. And so therefore we compete fiercely.
That's great. So tell me, how did you start the chaplaincy work then?
Well, in '82 I was invited to Hong Kong for an international sports missions congress. By an American named Eddie Waxer.
Oh yeah, I know Eddie.
Yes, Eddie, and that I went along and I saw how these things worked. And I said, well, surely this can happen back in Australia. And I sought out some senior clergy. I was 2 days a week ministering with the Interchurch Trade and Industry Mission, which places chaplains into industry and commerce. And so some of those people gathered me around and that we visited the heads of churches. These are the people who wear the pink shirts and the pointy hats. And they thought this was a wonderful idea. This was something out of the box. This was something brand new. And so we determined just to keep it under the authority of the heads of churches. Because professional sport is an area where it'd be very easy to go off on a tangent and to have people involved who would want to go their own little church political way.
Yes.
And so we had to stop that right from the beginning.
Right.
And so heads of churches took it on, and I was responsible to them. And we began to feed information through to the professional sports then. I came over here in '84 to the Olympics. I was part of the chapel program. I was writing field hockey. And then afterwards I did a study tour.
Okay.
And I spent some time with the Cleveland Browns and some of the other professional sports who were here. And then I went down to Dallas. And something that I discovered was that everybody in a professional sport is a destiny figure. They control what happens to you. The doctor, the physio, the team owner, the coach. Everybody has a say in your destiny, except the chaplain. He was the non-destiny figure. Now, wasn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
And so that set me off, and I went back home and I began to feed these ideas through. I also discovered that as I began to look at what the FCA, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, did, what AIA did, Athletes in Action, what World Sports did, what PAO did, Pro Athletes Outreach, all these different groups, they were all focusing on something, but none of them would fit into our culture as they were. We had to develop something that fitted into our culture.
Gotcha, yeah.
And so we were able to do that. And whereas here in America, one of the interesting things is that you were founded by the Pilgrim Fathers. You have a proclivity to God. But in Australia, we were founded as a penal colony by convicts. We do not have that.
Okay.
And so we had to think of a way through just a philosophical thinking whereby we could get to that starting point. And so what we thought about was ideas such as, now you go to the supermarket and you ask the person on the shelf, could I get a jar of honesty? Which aisle? Aisle is that one on, you know? Or what about a packet of integrity? Or what about a container of loyalty? Now there's a whole host of these words, but they're the intangibles of life. You cannot see or touch them, but they are just as important. They are in fact more important because that's what our relationships are based on. But faith is exactly the same. Faith is one of those intangibles, except that just in Hebrews 11 verse 1 it says, now faith is the substance. So if you have a glass of water, what's a word for the water? It's substance. So now faith has got some sort of concrete aspect to it. And in Judges 2 verse 10 it says, there arose a generation that knew not God nor the things that he had done for Israel. And I determined that on my watch, this was not going to apply to the young athletes of the nation.
Wow, that's great. Tell me, how are you received? Are they, because I know these are very unusual people, very committed to success. You come in there, do they resent you or what?
Totally not. Now, don't forget, we have only got 20 million people. Therefore, these professional athletes are your next door neighbour.
Okay.
They're just the kid who went to school with you. And so you don't have that kind of aggrandizement as you get here.
Okay.
Because we are much smaller of population. Everybody knows somebody who you know. And so that gives it a very different atmosphere. And that everybody's had some kind of understanding of God, although they haven't really got to the point of the proclivity toward belief. Now, just a second aspect of this is that everybody asks themselves questions like, who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? Who determines right from wrong? You know, who does that stuff? And in fact, what's real? What is real? Is the girl selling the toothpaste with the shiny teeth on the TV? is that real, or they're trying to sell you something? So everything in which you look at.
Yeah.
And so as I went through this process, and then I met Gernot Kunzelmann at the 82 conference, who was an Austrian ski champion, and he had built this lodge up in the Alps, just for fellow sports people, so that he could share Jesus with them. And I said to myself, what a wonderful idea that is, understanding that in our culture it's the beach.
Ooh, oh yeah.
So Mr. Basil Sellers, who I'd met, a very good friend, he decided this was too good of an opportunity to pass, and he sponsored us constructing a respite facility for the Australian Institute of Sport athletes, the elite athletes. 2 hours drive from Canberra to the beach.
Yeah.
And we opened that in 1992, debt-free, all by faith support. My wife and I have now been living for 27 years by faith support. And we trusted the Lord. And at the opening, we had Nick Farr-Jones, a world champion rugby player, a Janine Trahan, world champion yachtswoman. Her husband was the tactician on Australia 2 that won the America's Cup in 1983. And so they came down and they opened it for us. And we had the Australian Institute of Sport people there, and we philosophically handed them the key. And we said, this is now yours because we love you through Jesus.
Wow.
And so all the team groups come down to us, and they have their respite. They have team groups coming down, individuals coming down, families coming down, and then I get a time with them just to spend with them.
So do you live on the premises?
Well, we did live there just for 14 years, and we've since duplicated that one on the north coast. And now we've got two. One's called Basil Sellers Maruya, and the second one's called Basil Sellers Tweed. So we've got two now.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
The whole thing about sports is, you know, we've just seen the pictures of Michael Phelps smoking marijuana and that. These guys, they're young. They must have the most terrible, sort of problems to deal with. You know, who do they trust? These agents. How honest are these agents? Their accountants, are they stealing money from them? How do you advise? I mean, you advise them spiritually. Do you help them in any other way as well?
I recall one time that I read a newspaper article about one of our top cricketers who had somehow signed his life away, his name away.
Yeah.
And I phoned him at the motel, just where he was, with the team travelling around, and I said, had you seen this newspaper article? And I said, are you aware of what you have done? And I said, may I suggest, respectfully, that you get some good advice. Yeah. And if you need some good advice, I can put you onto somebody. And he said to me, Mark, he said, I know somebody who will now give me some good advice, and he did. Now, so those sort of things do happen. Yeah. But it's not the focus of what I'm doing.
No, no. But you care for them as in a holistic way, not just.
Absolutely. Aussies can see through you. Yeah. I had Roy Masters spoke to me once. He's a very famous journalist, a very famous football coach. Yeah. And he said he said to me, Mark, now this was about a week after I began. Yeah. This was back in 82. He said, Mark, he said, a professional athlete can smell a phony a mile away. So he said, that is my little tip to you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's so true. Yeah. How do you help them when they're no longer in the spotlight and, you know, their money's disappeared? They've suddenly discovered that it went pretty quickly. Yes. What do you do in that? In 2000, having been a chaplaining just the Australian cricket team for 17 years, I was sick of the travel. I said, no more travel. I'm going to move sideways to life after cricket. And we had 7 of the top Australian cricket people join me in this new program called Life After Cricket. and And in fact, you have just highlighted a major aspect. There's a book called By His Own Hand by David Frith that details that the highest percentage of suicides amongst professional sports people are international cricketers.
Huh.
And so we have put a great deal of emphasis. We produce a biannual newsletter titled The Australian Retired Cricketers Biannual Newsletter.
Yeah.
It's our editorial team are these famous cricketers, and then I have a chaplain's chat in that. And we know it's read because we get letters to say, this is our change of address.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Now, I must tell you, for those of you living in the United States, that cricket is one of the most amazing games, because when you have an international game between England and Australia or whatever, it goes on for 5 days. I don't know any sport on earth that goes on. And to tell you even more how crazy this is, every few years we have this, they call it the Test series for the Ashes between England and Australia, and this is war. But the loony part of it, Mark, is that they're competing for an urn with some ashes in. Apparently when Australia first beat England more than 100 years ago, I think they burnt the wickets, and they keep them at Lord's in London at the famous cricket, really the World Centre of Cricket in Lord's, and they play for these silly ashes. It's unbelievable. Yes. So people, you obviously love cricket. Just give a little explanation to our American friends what cricket is.
Well, here's the truth. Cricket is not my game. Field hockey is my game.
Oh, no.
But as I became chaplain, I discovered that the coach did not want a second coach on board.
Okay.
And that became very important to us. As we began to place chaplains all around the country, just in all the various sports, they did not want second coaches. They wanted a chaplain.
Yeah.
They wanted somebody who was there for the athletes, not for the sport.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was a very significant distinction. I see them bowl, I see them bat. I had Greg Matthews, just a famous spin bowler, say to me once, he said, "Chaplain," he said, "tell me when my foot goes over the line."
Yeah.
Well, there were 2 lines and he has 2 feet. Now, he was just my problem. And he said to me after 2 bowls, he said, "Go away, Chaplain." And he often tells me that story.
Yeah. But cricket really, maybe you should go on Google and type it in. And it's not the insect, it's actually the game. And if you want to see how loony cricket is, type in the Ashes. And find out how 2 bunches of grown men nearly kill each other to get some ashes from all those years ago. But sports really is just ingrained in so much of our life. I last year, the year before last, when David Beckham was coming to the LA Galaxy, they had Faith Night. And I found this very interesting, that the Galaxy had a bunch of Christians playing on the team. And I was allowed to interview several of them, including Kobe Jones, who is, probably the most capped American soccer player. And I was asking them all, are you going to invite David Beckham? They have a chapel out there. Are you going to invite David Beckham to come to the services? We don't know whether he went to any of them, but you realize that in America, almost every sporting thing, they have these chaplains, but is it still quite rare in Australia?
Just the chapel process of which you speak of here rarely happens in Australia.
Okay.
That is not the cultural norm.
Yeah.
The cultural norm there is that they want to see who you are. They want to have a good long look at you.
Okay.
And then you build a one-to-one relationship.
It's a one-to-one rather than the whole...
Yes.
Yeah, I got
so we find that to be much more effective within our cultural setting than to get them all together, and they wouldn't come in any case.
Yes.
Except for motor racing. They do come for motor racing.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Now, can you just also explain, there's this very weird game that you play called Aussie Rules of Football, and I've never figured it out. Is that similar to rugby, or is that a totally different game?
Totally different. They think that it came from just the Aboriginals playing a similar type of exercise.
Okay.
And what it is that you have two teams of 18. 18! Two teams of 18. And that they need to kick a ball through 4 posts.
Okay.
The 2 centre posts you get 6 points, and the 2 outer posts you get 1 point.
Okay.
And they have 4 quarters, 30-minute quarters.
Yeah.
So after playing 2 hours, plus all the breaks, it's a very full afternoon. Patrons turn up by their thousands upon thousands, and it's a spectacular sport. They have to catch the ball up in the air. It's a smaller ball, just which you catch and then you pass on.
Gotcha.
You've got to see it just to believe it. It's a bit like a kangaroo.
Now, Mark, if somebody is watching or listening this who is on the edge of breaking into professional sports, maybe they don't know the Lord or whatever, could you just take a moment to just talk to that person, maybe into the camera, you know, and as if that person was in the room with you? What would you like to say to them as they're on the edge of their professional career?
Well, I'd be saying to you 3 key things. Honour your father and your mother. They're the ones who have raised you, who brought you up, who spent the time with you, who've driven you for miles to this thing and miles to that thing. Honour your mum and dad, because there's nothing more precious than your family. So that's the first thing. Number 2 is that be always aware of your conscience. There is no greater guide to your life than your conscience. And if you see something going down and you know that it's not right, run. Turn around and run. Psychologically run, physically run.
Sure.
You know, so your conscience is a wonderful guide to you. And that you'll often get people ask you to do things and you know it's not right, run. You be the peer, not be the peered. I told my kids, you be the peer. You let them follow you. Don't you be peered. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is that keep close to the Lord. There is nothing more important. Everybody has a sense of the Lord. Now, they may not be able to articulate that, and they may not be able to pray out loud because the words are just too are foreign to them, but they know in their heart that there's somebody out there bigger than them, who looks over them, who cares for them, who loves them, and of course that's the Lord Jesus Christ. However, for some young people that is not known. And so always have a word to the Lord. Just before you go to sleep, say, Lord Jesus, look after me tonight. Thank you for my mum and dad. Thank you for keeping my conscience sharp. Allow me to do my very best. That's they're the 3 things.
Wow. We're speaking with Mark Tronson now. You may not believe this, but he's quite enthusiastic. In fact, I've had trouble getting a word in all the way through. But Mark, it is so great that, you know, even though you've had setbacks, physical setbacks maybe, and, you know, it's great that you, instead of dwelling on, you know, the speech impediment and that sort of thing, you know, you've been able to go forward. Just give us a word for people who feel God can't use them because they have some disability. What would you say to them?
Lining up to buy a train ticket or a bus ticket for a person who has a speech impediment is the most fearful, inner struggle. And you go up there to the window and you ask, and you know you're going to get stuck, and you feel as though you're stupid, and the people behind you are there waiting, and that there's nothing worse than to have that experience, and that I have that every day of my life. And there is a sense in which I've just said, Lord, this is part of me. My dad had the same thing. And yet I rejoice in it. I rejoice in the Lord because I've got this stammer. And the Lord is able to use that, and it doesn't matter what. I've just made myself available to the Lord.
And the Bible talks about God can use, you know, I have a theory, which isn't just a theory, it's a biblical thing, that God uses the weak things of this world to confound the wise. And I wrote an article once with Brother Andrew, why I wanted to be a failure. Because God can only really use failures. If we're so self-important, he can't use us, you know. So Mark Tronson, what a lovely story, what an inspiring story. Do you have a website people can go to?
Yes, www, full stop.
Oh no.
Bush Orchestra. Simple as that. Bush Orchestra.
That's nothing to do with George Bush, is it?
BUSHORCHESTRA. Bush Orchestra, as in bird symphony. You know, the birds singing?
Yeah.
BushOrchestra.com.
Oh, that's
simple as that. www, full stop, Bush Orchestra, full stop, com. All lowercase.
That's wonderful. Well, it's been a joy to talk with you, Mark. And, you know, I just want to ask people to pray for you, pray for your wife. You're over here on a brief visit, and we just want to welcome you to America, and we know God's going to use you while you're here. So, Mark, thank you so much, my friend.
Good.
Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you.